Hello, hello. Here we are for the Libra eclipse. So we have a Libra solar eclipse on the 25th of March. And sorry, it's a lunar eclipse. Excuse me, it's the full moon eclipse. So it is a lunar eclipse. It's not a total eclipse. The following one in Aries 2 weeks after this will be a total lunar eclipse, which does tend to give more impact. Saying that, so some eclipses will be louder, and the next one will be louder than this one, but also it's very dependent on where it hits your chart. So remember that it's important for you to look at where it hits your chart. So don't worry too much about the fact that this says it's a 23 degrees Aries rising chart. Look at how it impacts your own chart, because I've set this chart up for where I am. And so depending where in the world you live, it may look different. But not only that, unless you're used to reading charts, I would worry more about where there are things close in degree points to your own chart. So because this eclipse is happening at 5 degrees of this the moon is at 5 degrees of Libra and the sun is at 5 degrees of Aries, you're going to definitely look around the 5-degree mark of the cardinal signs. And so that would be Libra, Aries, but also Capricorn and Cancer. And you can take that out a bit. So you can say 2 or 3 degrees on either side of the 5. That's going to say, okay, if I have planets or points within that space, if I have my sun, moon, or rising in that sort of gap of 2 to 7, 8 degrees of the cardinal signs, this is going to be a little bit more obviously impactful for you. And also depending where that falls in your chart. If it's in one of the intensive houses, the first house of me, the fourth house of home, roots, and security, the seventh house of your relationships and partnerships, the 10th house of your reputation and career, those are going to be also more pertinent. So it's always good to look at whatever we're saying about this chart now, how does that personally impact me? So everything is always like, take it back to your own chart. Your own chart is your key. So if you want to understand and unlock things to do with you, then you take the information that's currently happening, the transits, and then you take it to your own chart. So I just want to make that really, really, really clear. But you can see here that this is an early degree of the cardinal sign, 5 degrees, full moon happening. And the nodes are obviously also getting closer and closer. So the reason the next eclipse is more of a total eclipse than this one is because the next eclipse is going to be closer to the nodes. And that's those nodes are not planets or anything. They're sensitive points that indicate where it is that the eclipses will fall. So will the moon create a shadow over the sun, or will the earth create a shadow over the moon? And very often we're having those points, but we don't even get very much visibility of it, because not everywhere in the world will experience the visibility even of a total eclipse. But we will feel it energetically nonetheless. We will feel it more if it's hitting our charts more particularly. So Aries and Libra are the signs that are Aries me and Libra us, or we. So there's always a relational dynamic when we're dealing with that. Who am I and who am I within the we? And who are you and who are you within the we, the us? The relationship is like an energy of its own. It's me and you, and then the relationship is part of it's like another person almost. And all of those things need to be tended to. And so when there's strong Aries energy, and at the moment we're going to have Sun and the North Node, which is our more dharmic energy, the way we're trying to grow into, and Chiron, where we're really looking at the wound of the independent, where I love how Pam Gregory, a wonderful astrologer, always says the wound of the I amness, like where we have to work on the I am. So that's all happening in the Aries space. So there's a lot of like brightness, a lot of potential for our growth moving forward and our healing. If we can look at who am I, if we can get really clear on who am I, if I can have my healthy boundaries, if I can have do my own energetic housekeeping, keep my side of the street clean. If it's like I'll do me, then I am not your responsibility. You do not have to manage me. You do not really need to do anything to do with me. I want to connect with you. Here's the relationship. I want to be in a relationship with you, but I don't need you to make me complete. What was that movie? I think it might have been Jerry Maguire many years ago, where there was that like iconic line where he's like, "You complete me." And that's actually, let's try not go there because we should not need another person to complete us. And that is very much how we are seeming to be wired and conditioned for many years, hundreds of years. But the reality is, the more we can be complete in ourselves, Aries, the more I can bring into the relationship. I'm now not going to take you personally because I know when it's your stuff and my stuff. I'm not going to blame you when I'm behaving badly because I know this is my stuff. So it becomes like I choose to be with you. I choose to relate with you in whatever context that is, whether you're talking about romantic relationships or business partnerships, friendships, relationships with children. I mean, Libra is very much the romantic partnership or the marriage, the contractual relationship. So even if it's contractual in business, but it really can be any relationship. So the more that we focus on Aries's healing and Aries's dharma, the more that we can release some of the old South Node stuff around. South Node is our old karma. So the more we can release some of our old stuff around relationships, our old baggage around relationships. My March newsletter was happily ever after. WTF does that mean? Because, and I think this is where it really is theming in with this so strongly, because if we come from that happily ever after paradigm, if we've been so preconditioned to believe that life is going to be better once prince meets princess, the knight rescues the maiden, we can bring any number of many narratives to it to create that same archetypal theme of he needs to be tough and strong, she needs to be rescued, she's allowed to be emotionally vulnerable, but she's not allowed to be strong. And he's not allowed to be emotionally vulnerable, but he has to be strong. Like, it's just messed up. And really what we need to do is we need to say, I am the knight, I am the maiden, gender irrespective. And then we need to be all the parts of that story, and we need to integrate all the parts. And that's, again, coming back to Aries. I'm going to do my work. I'm going to look at where I am a knight. I'm going to look at where I am a maiden. I'm going to look at where I'm emotionally vulnerable. I'm going to look at where I'm emotionally numb and stunted. And all those parts are my responsibility. All those parts of me are my responsibility. And all those parts of you are your responsibility. And so because we've got the South Node in Libra, and this is a Libra eclipse, we want to look at how can I shed some of this old stuff? Like, I definitely come from a paradigm where my gran really believed in putting on your lipstick and standing at the door with a drink in her hand for her husband, giving him a kiss, giving him the beer. The children were all clean and ready to say hello to dad, and that was about their interaction with dad. And then she made sure the dinner was on the table and he could just unwind after a long day, which is all well and good, but she'd had a long day too. It didn't occur to her. So the conditioning there is that is what the good wife does. And if you want to keep your husband happy or whatever there's so many ways we can look at this and go, but hang on a second. He may have been happy because he got home, but maybe actually he wanted to do what men are doing now, getting home and doing bath time with their kids or having some playtime with their kids. Maybe he didn't get that opportunity because that wasn't expected from a man in his day. And maybe she didn't get him to say, you've been busy with the kids all day. Why don't you put your feet up and I'll do bath time, or I'll cook the dinner? Because maybe he enjoyed cooking. He may have not had that as his normal day job, but maybe he got, in my grandfather's case, he didn't. So this is more of a more of an analogy than a reality. But maybe he would wanted to come home and tap into some creativity and let her have an hour of playing with the children rather than telling them what to do and organizing everything. So you can just see where we got conditioned into certain roles of of how relationships should be. And this is really about unpacking some of that. Let some of that go, because if that doesn't work for you in your relationship, then it's not okay. And to be fair, we have been changing a lot of these old narratives for a long time now, but this is another big kind of acceleration portal to do that. This is generally quite a nice eclipse in that Venus is ruling this eclipse. So Venus is the ruler of Libra, and she's ruling this eclipse. So we want to see, well, where is Venus in the chart? And Venus is in a sign where she is exalted. That means she is held on high in Pisces. She is just beautiful, creative, fluid, flowing, happy, artistic, really in a great place. So she's happy and she's ruling the eclipse, which is a great thing. I also wanted to mention that she very recently had her, well, a few weeks from this point, but had her conjunction with Mars. So that's quite a like strong engagement of energy there that can be uncomfortable. And same, by the time we get this, she will have also just done that with Saturn. Saturn and Mars are looked at as the malefics. So they're quite a tough conversation for Venus when she comes into kissing contact with them to say, hi, I haven't seen you in a while. How are things going? And Mars is all like hot and feisty and saying, well, you know, and getting kind of up in her business a little bit too aggressively. It can be passionate, although this one happened in Aquarius. So passion maybe isn't the word I would have used. It probably upregulated her nervous system coming into contact with Mars, but then she went past Mars, then she got Saturn, and Saturn was like, you know, he kind of stifles creativity a lot of the time. He's contracting and cold, and he's less happy in Pisces. He doesn't really love his time there because he can't structure things the way he wants to. So Venus would have given him a space to be a little bit more creative with it. And the analogy I've been using in the last few videos, I believe, is that he's now trying to build himself a coral palace because there's a bit of structure to it at the bottom of the ocean. And she might have come there and given him that beautiful idea. She might have said, well, why don't you build this? Because in this environment that you're in the ocean, and you're still here for a while, this is what you could build. And so now he's kind of working with that. But by the time she got past him, she was probably like, oh gosh, he's a bit of a downer. And I just want to really enjoy my time in the sign where I'm so happy. So now she is past him. I mean, we could still call that a conjunction because they are still kind of quite close together, but it's moving, she's moving away. So it's coming off the boil, or it's thawing, maybe we should say, because Saturn is more of a freezing energy than boiling energy. So she's thawing now. She's enjoying the motion of the ocean. She's feeling pretty creative. She's in a good space. She also is in Jupiter's sign when she is in Pisces. And Jupiter is in her sign, her other sign. She rules both Libra and Taurus. So Jupiter's in Taurus in her other sign. So they have mutual reception with one another, which means they're in each other's comfortable, in each other's homes, and they're sort of, and they're both the benefics, where Mars and Saturn are the malefics. These two are the benefics. They're more joyful and they have more of an expansion, attraction kind of energy to them. And they're in each other's signs, which means they're mutually beneficial to each other. They're wanting to hold space for and support one another. So that's another nod to the fact that this is not in many ways, this is not an aggressive eclipse. It's an eclipse that says, let's change the story. This is so creative. This is so beautiful. Let's embody it. Taurus, Jupiter. Let's really enjoy the creative sensory experience of what would the new relationship look like, and how would that feel, and how would it smell, and you know, like really the nitty-gritty of it in a fun and creative way. And then also Pluto at almost 2 degrees now at this point is forming a trine to this new moon, this full moon, and a sextile to the sun. So Pluto, who has been such a loud messenger in the last few months, as we went with all those personal planets coming up to Pluto in Aquarius for the first time, giving us this kind of like, you know, this first insight as to the next 20-year cycles and themes that will be happening for us personally and collectively. So he's been kind of loud and kind of intense and kind of awkward and discombobulating for all of us. And we've been having to deal with what that might look like in our own lives. And by the time we get to this eclipse where Venus is so happy and ruling the eclipse, Pluto says, you know what? Let me give you a little bit of support. So it's almost like not a reprieve from the lessons of Pluto, because Pluto's not really a reprieve-y kind of guy. However, he's saying, look, let's just take our foot off the gas for a minute. And yeah, this is exciting. This is creative. We're transforming. Pluto is the ultimate in transformation. And Pluto is also about power struggles. So if we look at that kind of example that I gave in terms of the old paradigm of relationship going back, in my case, a couple of generations, you know, it was a power thing. He held the power, you know, he held the power and she was underneath him. And that was very much where the hierarchy of the family dynamic would be. The husband held all the cards, the wife came second, and then the children. And then the wife was the bridge, trying to kind of handle everything with the children and handle everything with the husband, and she was frazzling. And then at some point the wife went into the workforce, but she was still underneath him doing the day job and the children and the communication. This isn't good for him either, because he's stagnating. He's not getting the opportunity to be an engaged dad. He's not getting the opportunity to make household decisions, accepting with this, like, I'm the head of the household kind of attitude, but he doesn't know how to use the washing machine or whatever the case may be. So the way that we've been changing things now is about power dynamics within relationships. It's like we are equals and we both have roles in this relationship, and maybe she earns more money, and maybe he has shorter days, and maybe he's always on bath times, or maybe she does the Saturday sport run, or, you know, you find the dynamic in your relationship, but it's all about finding a better level of equality and then coming back to you do you, I do me. How do I find that in myself? So if whether I'm in a female body or a male body or whatever it is, remember, this is never really about gender. It's always yin and yang. It's always the archetypal he, she, okay? But whatever body I'm in, I'm probably more of a yang woman, naturally more of a doer, more go, 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 go. How do I start to learn to unpack that? Because if I'm looking at myself as the male power dynamic within my own self, and then I'm looking at where my female power dynamic within my own self is. So we will see it reflected in our external relationships. Absolutely, that's always how it works. But also the level of bringing it back and being all of those parts, exploring all of those parts within your own self. And with all this interesting reflectiveness, it's interesting to point out that Mercury at this point, here at 23 degrees of Aries, also in the Aries, also thinking around the I am and how do I do me better, and how do I be responsible for my own choices and actions and so on, and less reactive and more responsive with Aries energy. Mercury is already in shadow to go retrograde, which I think is on the 1st of the month. So only about 5 odd days from this point, Mercury is going to go into retrograde. So Mercury is in shadow now, and the shadow period of a retrograde is always giving us little clues, the things that are uncomfortably popping up. And with regards to Mercury, that will be around short trips and travel, new information coming through, the way I speak, the way I talk, the way people talk to me, communication in general. So things that are starting to niggle, probably they've been niggling for maybe the last week already at this point. I haven't checked the dates exactly, but starting to niggle since Mercury went into shadow. By the point of this eclipse, they're real niggly. And then if 5 odd days on from there, Mercury's going to go backwards, and now it's like, oh, actually, this is more than a niggle. I don't like it. I don't want that story anymore. I am not prepared. And because it's in Aries, it's going to be a lot of I. I do not want to, I, me, mine, Aries energy. Okay, so that's going to be another interesting thing that's going to be kind of like, just adding a layer of retrospection or upcoming retrospection, because it's still not moving backwards yet, but this upcoming retrospective space of how do I change these stories? Because, I mean, and being somebody who's done this kind of work for years, personally and professionally, changing stories is easy in theory. And we might have this clear idea of, you know what, I'm going to be an empowered woman and I'm going to tell my story this way and I'm going to face my fear and I'm not going to be scared and all these things. But when we actually start applying these things, you start to realize how much it is in your cellular memory that this is the role of a woman or a man, or this is the relationship dynamics, or whatever it is. This stuff is so buried in us so deeply that even if my mind, Mercury, is telling me that this is how I'm going to tell my story, my body, and remember, we've got Mercury will then, after his retrograde, move into Taurus, which is very embodied. We've got Uranus and Jupiter soon after this it will be later in April, we'll be having a conjunction in the sign of body. And Uranus is like higher mind. So Uranus, Jupiter having this conjunction in the sign of Taurus is very much breaking us down into we've got to get out of these things, but how does the body change? Because our mind can change quickly for some of us. Some of us have got very sticky minds, but it's easier to change our mind than it is to get our body to change. That the body's more dense, literally, so therefore it's slower to change. Thoughts move quickly, but also emotional triggers will come up. So you think you've changed your story, but you get into a situation where an emotion is triggered, the body reacts, and then the mind goes, but I wasn't going to do this anymore. That was my last decade story, and here I am again. That's why I'm saying it's easy in theory, and the concept is simple, but in practice, these things are not that easy. So I sometimes get super enthusiastic and gung-ho about a new thing. I'm going to get this right. And then I'm often super disappointed when it's not all as easy as all that. And so I'm giving you a little insight to remember to be gentle with yourself. Also, this is not, I mean, it's more of a feeling into it and observing of it in this eclipse than a doing anything too intensely. Because by the time we hit this eclipse, and if you looked at my Aries ingress video, you would have seen that Mars was in Aquarius for the Aries ingress, which is when Aries stepped into the cardinal fire sign of Aries, when the sun stepped into the cardinal fire sign of Aries. But now the sun's been in there for 5 days already, and in that time, Mars has stepped into Pisces. And as lovely as Venus finds Pisces, Mars finds it uncomfortable. Mars does not love being in Pisces because Mars is hot and fast, and when you get in the ocean, you get wet and cold, and Mars is hot and dry. So this is like the exact opposite conditions to his comfort zone. And not only that, I mean, you cannot move as fast in the water because there's that resistance that you can in the air, and that, or on land, and that is uncomfortable for Mars. So Mars, who is our planet of getting things done, is kind of inhibited here to slow down a little. Think about it, feel into it. And he's like, feelings. Again, the masculine has been taught not to feel. The masculine has been told big boys don't cry and toughen up. That's what we've been teaching our little boys for hundreds and hundreds of years. So now Mars, our little boy, part of self and part of the collective, gets into the sign where he doesn't know how to swim and he's failing, and boys don't fail and boys don't cry, and you should be tougher and you should be better, and that's uncomfortable. And Venus is floating and she's catching the waves and she's diving and she's succeeding, and girls are supposed to be weaker than boys. Girls are supposed to be underneath boys, and here the boy is and he can't get it right. So that's uncomfortable a little. And so there are going to be these interesting reflections back to relationships, back to you versus me, or just me versus the other parts of me, me versus myself in relationship, my Mars versus my Venus, my Jupiter and my Mercury, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to stop there, but thank you very much for watching. I will pop a link at the bottom if you are interested, excuse me, in working more intensely with me at all. But other than that, please like, share, follow, subscribe, and thank you so much for your time. Happy eclipse in Libra.